All right, well, let's go ahead and have our testimony shared by Rhonda today. So, Rhonda, welcome, and let's have this great opportunity to hear what God has done in your life and the amazing testimony.
Amazing, I'm not sure, but it is a testimony. Thank you, and thanks for allowing me to do this. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who has victory over drugs, alcohol, inappropriate relationships, sex, and abandonment issues. But I still struggle with food. My name is Rhonda. 1 John 5:10 out of the Good Word says, "Those who believe in the Son of God have a testimony of God in them." And first, I want to open in prayer. Father God, just thank you for the miracles that you've done in my life and how you've let my story been used in the past, and I hope now too, for your glory. May it be received and related to in such a way that it gives hope to someone who may be struggling. And I ask this in Jesus' name, amen. The things that I learned as a child shaped my idea of what was normal in life, and the things that I learned from my parents and that I survived as a child, I ended up repeating in my own life. Adopted at birth, and that was never hidden from me. I was told that they were lucky to have me. That was until I was in my teens when my mom changed her tune. Most of that was due to my rebellious nature and originally my mouth. Later on, it ended up being acting out and drugs and alcohol and relationships. My dad being in the Air Force, we moved from state to state and even overseas for a while. And I think that raising two kids for my mom on her own was more than she could handle. He used to send things from overseas to my brother and I, and he used to make cassettes while he was flying in the planes. And he would always talk to my brother and I what was going on, but never any details. But I never remember him saying anything at all to my mom on those tapes. I have a few good memories of my adopted mom. She could make up stories. She used funny voices, sang silly songs, and, she dressed us well and fed us. But there was very little real nurturing that happened. My dad, when he was home, he was the one that nurtured us. He was the one who had my brother and I, we'd crawl up in his lap and he would get out his big Bible and he would tell us the stories of Jonah and the big fish. He would tell us the stories of Daniel and the lion's den. And, I love those times. And we looked through that old Bible and looked at all the old pictures, and I just remember those being really good times. He was my biggest cheerleader. At 10 years old, we joined my dad in Japan, and we became my mom's show ponies. She was an officer's wife, and she dressed the part. She dressed us the part, and we were actually her entertainment when she would have parties at the house. She would make my brother and I sing and make me play the piano, and I never learned how to read music. I played by ear. I knew two songs, and those were the only ones that we would do over and over again. Even then, I was honing the art of deception. I was a people pleaser, and I was learning the survival skills that I needed. I was developing into a codependent chameleon. I learned to fit in wherever I was by wearing masks and pretending to be who I needed to be liked by everyone around me. My brother was athletically inclined, and I was not. My mom favored him, and there was no real bones about it. He played football, he played baseball, and he bowled. And my mom was she was a pro bowler that was on a traveling team while we were there, or league. And my nickname was Gutterball Gertie, so she had no inkling to try and work with me to get the ball going straight down the alley. Instead, she signed me up for charm school and ballet because I was a klutz, and I needed to learn how to be a little more graceful. At 13, we came back stateside, and my dad wasn't with us. And without my dad being the buffer between my mom and him and us, my brother and I took the brunt of many of her outrageous tirades. She was verbally and physically abusive, and what used to be me being lucky to, or them being lucky to have us as kids that they had adopted, it became I was lucky to have a home and a roof over my head, and that was quite the change. We stopped going to church on a regular basis. My dad returned from Japan, and for the first time, I saw that he was a real alcoholic, and it was in full bloom. Later, my mom's behavior toward my dad became very ugly. She was belittling and berating, and she would often try and talk my brother and I out of liking my dad, or you shouldn't go with him, and it was awful, but it became violent fights between them, and she was usually the one that would provoke it. My mom did try to sway our affection away from him. Her manipulation towards my brother and I were oftentimes the scriptures used out of context. And so I always felt that I was being Bible beat. Um, you've done this, you're going to go to hell. And I started fearing that God that I hadn't even come to know yet. Dad drank daily, and he started meeting up with women in bars, and my mom would chase him down almost every night, throwing my brother and I in the back seat of the car, going in, yelling, screaming. People would come out to watch, and my brother and I would just sink in the back seat. And it wasn't because of my dad, it was because of her antics. They divorced, fueling my abandonment issues I didn't even know that I had. But here again, I find out later in life that, my dad didn't want kids. He had left his first wife and two girls behind. So I do have two half sisters, but I didn't meet them until I was in my 40s, actually. So one of them I didn't get to meet. And she just recently passed away 2 years ago, Christmas. Their divorce fueled that abandonment, and there was physical and emotional abuse that continued. Our family dysfunction, alcoholism. What happened in the house, my mom never wanted it. It was all about looking good, no matter what. We wanted to look good. And I learned all the lessons real well. I learned codependency. I learned to cover up for somebody else's problems, which was lying. I learned how to stuff feelings, to act as if everything was okay, even when it's not. Jeremiah 6:14 says, you cannot heal a wound by saying it's not there. I learned that relationships were temporary and that love hurt. Seemed like the people that were good to me always left. I craved attention, and I found boys. One wasn't enough. Mom was so worried that I was having sex that at 17 years old, she took me to the doctor to see if I had. And after that, I figured if she was going to do it, I was going to do it. That's when my love and relationship obsessions kicked in. I was looking for the perfect guy, the perfect relationship, and funny thing, to this day, I never found perfect. Today, I know perfect isn't in this life. It just isn't possible. I started using people, then drugs, and I was always trying to fill a God-shaped hole with worldly things. Proverbs 14:12 said, there is a way that appears to be right to a man, but it leads to death. I was crossing all the boundaries of what I thought a good girl should do. And I started believing the lies that my mom was throwing at me. I was just like my dad. I was a clown. No one would ever take me seriously. No one was ever going to want me. And God was going to punish me for all I had done. I believed her. And I started pushing myself further and further away from a God that I knew couldn't love me the way that I was. I believed her, and I wanted to do something right, something good, but I couldn't stop the sin that was snowballing in my life. I stormed through lives. I faced more physical and mental abuse at the hand of men who said they loved me. And I turned the tables on my philosophy at that time, and I became the one to love them and leave them when they didn't suit my physical or emotional needs any longer. This worked as this worked well because I always had the house, the apartment, the car, and I paid the bills. So basically, I would date with a U-Haul. I would see them, meet them, move them in, and then move them out. Then I met an older, self-assured, smart guy. I ended up pregnant and we got married, only to start sleeping around before my daughter was even a year old. I introduced him to drugs and then I left him because he got hooked and couldn't get off of them. Or so I thought. I hadn't realized that I was emotionally stunted and I wasn't even capable of having a healthy adult relationship. And I had no idea what love really was. Excuses and denial of the facts led me into a dilemma between heart and head. I had several abortions because of unprotected sex. I was trying to bury the self-loathing using a series of men drinking and drugging, blackouts, moves, and several close calls with violence. Then I met my God in blue jeans, a tall, wild-haired bad boy, yes, the kind your parents warn you about. And I knew that I was going to marry this man while I was helping him hang a banner over a freeway overpass asking him asking his girlfriend to marry him. He had moved into my house renting a room, and it did not remain platonic, at least not for long. After a honeymoon period, and not a married one, we fought verbally and physically, and we spent 6 years of the oh baby thing. That's where we would fight when we didn't have dope. We would go through it, and I would leave, move out for a while, and he would say, oh baby, I'll never do this again. And that was a repeat, repeat, repeat over and over again for several years. In the meantime, I had 2 more beautiful children, a boy and a girl. And it was time. I decided, you get this, okay. I decided it was time for him to either poop or get off the pot. So I printed out and handed invitations to a wedding to everyone. And I handed him the last one. And I said, be there or get the heck out of my life. He showed up and we got married. I was working, spending every dime, buying food, paying rent, utilities, and every other cent was spent on drugs. So when the landlord sold the property, we had nothing saved up to move. So we ended up living in a tent with 2 babies in diapers, my oldest in 4th grade. And that's the way that we lived for a while. We traded a little 2-man dome tent, which all of us were sleeping in, for a big old canvas army tent, I think it was. And we thought we were moving up. We went from little flashlights to a couple of lanterns, and we really thought we had things going on. Well, my oldest was in 4th grade, and what happened from there was I never signed up for this. It finally hit me, you know. I was soon to hit an emotional bottom. My daughter came home from school one day, and she was kind of bummed, you know, and I thought, well, I'll do that mommy thing and just ask, what's going on? And she said, my friend asked if she could come and play at my house after school, and she had to tell them that she was living in a tent in a park. Ouch. Well, that really do it. Now, I knew that wasn't God's plan for my life. And this is where I had ended up because of my choices to use. That night, we fought. I took the kids and I left. And it was an on and off again thing for a while. And about Christmas time, in fact, it was Christmas Eve, my husband had said, he had called, and before in the past, when he would call, I would load the kids up. I would end up putting them in the car. I would go meet him wherever he was, and it would be on again. But this time it was something different. This time I had my mom drive me, and we got there. He said, I got the room, come on in, and there's my get them all out of the way here. I said, you can have the kids, but I'm not staying. And it's like, what? No, 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 you don't understand. It's Christmas time, family, we got to be together. And I said, no, 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 you don't understand. I can't do this anymore. And he pulled out the ace he had up his sleeve, which was, you know what, I've got a bag and I've got a gun and I'm going to have to kill myself. And I said, you're going to have to do what you're going to have to do, but I can't do this anymore. And me and the kids and my mom left. It wasn't long after that, because that was the 24th of December, the 28th of January, which was our first year anniversary being married, he went into a treatment facility. He did that because I was threatening divorce if he didn't straighten up. He started working on himself while he was in there. He started making plans on what we were going to do when he got out. He talked about doing stuff. We had never talked about things, other than what we were going to do next, where we were going to get whatever and just how we were going to live from day to day. But he was talking about the stuff like I always wanted him to. What did I do? I started having an adulterous relationship. I don't like the word affair because that sounds like it's something fancy and pretty, and so I don't care for that. He left the facility at 60 days, and that night I didn't show up, and he came back the next morning, and I did too, and he said, hard night? And I lied, and I said, I stayed at my kid sister's, my friend's, and I don't know how long it took, but it wasn't long after that I told him what had happened. And normally in the past, it would have been an emotional, verbal altercation, sometimes physical, but he didn't leave. We didn't fight. He was doing what he was supposed to. And I was white knuckling it, just waiting along. God is such a gentleman. He showed me through my husband that there was hope. And eventually I was invited to go to a meeting, and they did the short version of the Serenity Prayer. And everybody identified themselves in this meeting as addicts, and I character assassinated everyone in the room, and it wasn't very long there of hearing their stories that it took that jump from up here to down here. And I started listening with my heart, and I started really looking at what they were sharing, and their eyes were smiling, and they truly looked happy, and they were talking about solutions to problems that they had in their life, real life stuff. And that was an attraction. And knowing what had happened in my husband's life, just seeing him, I knew it could possibly work for me too. So I would go to meetings when we had an opportunity together, and sometimes I would take the kids. Sometimes I would leave them with my oldest, who at that time was a little bit older, and she would babysit. I got to fall in love with my husband all over again. As he would share at meetings, God had ordained my steps to bring me back to him. And he was so patient. He waited until I was ready. I like to say that he left the 99 to come and get the one, and I was the one. They read the steps at every meeting, and they seemed too simple. The people kept saying to everyone, work the steps, read the book, get a sponsor. Could it be that simple? So I asked a gal to help me, and starting to work the steps, my life started changing too. I had to get honest about a few things. I had to admit that I was powerless and that my life was unmanageable. Well, that was pretty easy, knowing that I'd been living in a tent just 5 months prior. Well, but it was more than just the outward stuff. What about the things that led up to that? Yikes, all of it. I had to admit powerless over everything except my own decisions. I was responsible for my decisions. I was where I was because of me, not because of he or anyone else for that matter. I had no power over it once I put something into my body. I had to believe that a power greater than me could restore me to sanity. Holy cow, I was insane. Look at the things that I had done. If I wasn't chasing the drug or the guy, I believed that no, it was going to have to be something bigger than myself and more powerful than me that could fix me. Okay, God, here I am. And I am willing. Look at him. If it worked for him, maybe, just maybe, it could work for me too. And I started going back to church, and I was taking the kids. They really enjoyed it. It was the same church that I had gone to when I was 17 years old, and I had originally given my life to Christ. But that seed fell among thorns, and it grew up, and it was choked out by the world, and I didn't follow God. But he was patient. One of his many traits was just grace, 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 as my neighbor and my boss used to say. My husband ended up coming to church, and as God would have it, we understood those sermons as if it was written by somebody in recovery. We understood it as if the pastor was talking the steps. After all, it is the living word. Fresh and new is what it was all about. Recovery, learning to live with ourselves, and learning to live with others. As I grew, I learned that I needed to ask forgiveness for those things that I had done and forgive those who wronged me. Matthew 6:14 says, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others for their sins, your heavenly Father will not forgive you." I've made several lists over the years. Many times the same name appeared over and over again, as I had not fully yet dealt with the issues. That was my mom. This is where I had years of holding on to resentments against her, and that left me bitter until a long drive by myself after visiting my daughter. I broke. The tears flooded, and I just let go of a lot of the deep pain and anger. It was almost enough to pull me off to the side of the road. I had harbored this frustration of betrayal, bewilderment, regrets, and sorrow, and I got to share this step with my sponsors. Over the years, and yes, I did say sponsors because we've moved a couple of times and have changed sponsors, and I've never felt anything but safe with them after the first time I shared, and none of my secrets ended up out there in the world for me to hear back again. So I had to put a little more trust in the process. From looking at the issues that caused me to act out and what was behind my behaviors, how anger comes out when I'm afraid, how I would rather move on to the next relationship than have them see the real me and reject me. The what ifs. I got to ask God to remove my shortcomings, those things that I do that cause me to act out. Boy, I really disliked having to make amends for something that could have been avoided in the first place. I got to examine the people in the institutions and the things and make my amends list. It was important to have my sponsor to help me do this and to do it as if that was the only thing that I needed to do. Staying in the present is what I had to be reminded of. Just for today, put one foot in front of the other. Matthew 6:34 says that, therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Each step was built on the previous one. It was important that I expanded my support system to include other women. And this was real tough for me because I kept thinking that all the women were like me. They were either out after something I could provide them or my boyfriend. Well, I had to learn to reach out because what if my sponsor was busy or out of town or heaven forbid, she had a life of her own. I knew prior to recovery I had a few women friends, but most of them, like I was, were not trustworthy and emotionally shallow. Well, I had selfish motives while I was out there, so trust was something that came slowly over a period of time. Job 32:9 said, "It's not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right." And Proverbs 1 says, "Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance." That's what was important for me when I got a sponsor, is that I learned to trust and listen because they had been around longer than I had. And I know this program of Narcotics Anonymous was actually taken from AA, which was a bunch of drunks who got together, and I believe God led them in creating those steps. Making my amends didn't happen all at once, and I've been working on it for the past 33 years. I've made financial amends to establishments that I owed. An unpaid ticket in another state was actually forgiven in one case. I made a blind amends by sending a money order for repairs of damage that I had caused in years prior. The hardest amends were for the people that I cared about the most, my family. I was able to care for my mom when she became ill for about 6 months even after the damage that she had caused our family. My family and I extended God's grace to her by caring for her needs until she could care for herself. And then the second time, we had her for about a year until she passed away. When she died, the son she had abandoned, who was her only true, real son, she didn't include him in the will. And I was able, with my brother, to share a portion of her estate with him. I had no idea how it would affect this big, burly Navy man. He cried. He, he cried. We moved my dad up here when he was hospitalized, and he recovered and met his forever sweetheart. And that led him back to the Lord, and he was truly happy. He had been in recovery just short of 20 years before he passed, and I was privileged to be there and hold his hand when he took his last breath. I was able to ask my first husband's forgiveness for the many wrongs that I did to him in our marriage, and ask forgiveness for my children for dragging them through the emotional roller coaster when they were young. I was even able on Facebook to locate a gal who back I was very emotionally cruel to her in junior high school, and reach out to her and apologize to her. Uh, Today, I know that keeping short accounts by doing a daily inventory is real important, because I can reason things away if I just say, "Oh yeah, well, I'll get around to it," and pretty soon the edges soften, and I don't look at the reality of what I've done. So, keeping short accounts and making amends when things happen or as soon as I realize it are really important. I do have a built-in forgetter. The 11th step, through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. I was like a girl in love for the first time, because when I found out about Jesus, I just wanted to know more. And I know you guys can relate, or maybe you can't, but when you fall for somebody, the first thing that you want to do is you turn toward them, and you want to find out what's your favorite color, what's your favorite donut, how about your cake, want to know all that stuff. That was important. God drew me in, and my higher power, I decided, was Jesus Christ, and that The only thing that they told me is that he needed to be loving, forgiving, kind. And, the more I found out about him, the more I could turn and trust, and did. So I'm really grateful for that. He already knows my every need, my every thought, my every desire, and he wants the best for me. I've been doing meetings now long enough to know that I wanted more than what the A's had to offer. And getting to know Jesus and getting to know him more, I found out that those A's, like I said, you know what, they were based on a bigger book than our Narcotics Anonymous. Carrying the message of recovery through Jesus Christ is the 12th step for me. I have tried my best to share recovery wherever possible. It was freely given to me, and now I freely give it away. For 11 years, we ran a ministry out of our church. And when God says it's time to move on, it's time to move on. I just love Celebrate Recovery because it had a combination of God and the 12 steps. From Heartland to Crossroads Church to Better Together to Faith Community Church, we had survived 2 moves, 2 merges, and after 11 years, the pastors decided to close the group. And it had been like I had been torn apart. Maybe I just needed to know it was God's time and not mine. Or maybe God knew I would need breathing room when my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I needed the strength to be able to go through that with him. A year later, it was me who had to deal with breast cancer. Life throws curveballs. People get sick. Babies are born. People in our families pass away, and age changes us. Careers end, new jobs start, and life hurts sometimes. I've found sorrow lasts half as long when I share it with somebody, and joy lasts twice as long when I share it with somebody. God knew I needed people to pray with and to walk me through some of the hard stuff of life. Amazing that God gave a couple of drunks those 12 steps and a desire to help others. And look what's happened. I will always have another layer of the onion to peel back. But today, I'm trustworthy. Today, I believe I'm worthwhile. Today, I love and accept others right where they are, not where I want them to be. However, like God, I don't want to see them stuck. So if sharing the story of what God has done in my life helps to motivate them, well, my name is Rhonda, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. Thanks for letting me share.